Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday for October 12th. Many of us are encouraged and taught from an early age to be ambitious. The world is ours for the taking, and we're to strive to accomplish great and wonderful goals and ambitions and pursuits in life, to make the most of what this world has to offer, to take advantage and to accomplish wonderful, great things. However, this perspective, this worldview of personal ambition that is divorced from a biblical worldview is actually poison and leads to much heartache and folly, a lot of wasted time and wasted resources. Ambition can actually be the poison that spoils a life if it is divorced from the truths of Scripture. And so to help us gain a proper biblical perspective of the world, we turn to the wisest and the wealthiest and the most influential king of Israel who ever lived, and that is Solomon. Yes, we turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, or the book of Kohelet, which we started last week. And by way of summary, we can learn many great things, many great teachings from the book of Kohelet. I just want to share 5 of some major teachings in this book. First, the book of Ecclesiastes develops a God-centered worldview, recognizing the dangers of a self-centered worldview. It is foolish to be narcissistic and self-absorbed and preoccupied with your own personal self-ambition. Instead, from the days of our youth, we are to remember our Creator God. We are to have a God-focused, God-centered, God-yielded worldview and perspective on life. The book of Kohelet also reveals the reality of a sin-cursed world, and that is at the very beginning in chapter 1, verses 2 through 3, all is hevel, and there is no gain for human toil under the sun. That is language that reflects the curse of Genesis 3:17 through 19. So Kohelet then, from the very beginning, has a biblical worldview. He has a keen understanding of the fallenness and sin-cursed nature and the futility of a fallen world. The book of Kohelet also prescribes the limits of human endeavor and thought and human philosophy. There are limits to our fallen selves, and Kohelet is helpful in reminding us of those human limits. The book of Kohelet also teaches that all people are accountable to God and will be judged by Him. The final climactic conclusion, when all has been said and discussed, when all of Kohelet's wisdom has been expounded, the end of the matter is that the Creator God will judge all men. And so in response to that judgment, we are to fear God and to keep His law, His commandments. An excellent worldview to have. And finally, another major teaching in the book of Kohelet is to have joy in God's gracious provision, and yet also to avoid sinful self-indulgence that leads to the exploitation of others. And so, more specifically than today, we wanted to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 3 through 11. A longer passage, but we just wanted to make some general observations from this longer text. Ecclesiastes 1, verses 3 through 11. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness, and man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been. It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things. yet to be among those who come after. And so then, when we look at this passage, in order to prove that all is Hevel, according to verse 2, that key summary thematic statement in verse 2, that all is Hevel, Hevel of Hevelim, and that man gains nothing through all his toil under the sun, verse 3, Kohelet examines human history and nature in our passage for today. The key context in this unit is in verse 3, all the toil at which he toils. And so the repetition of the same root in grammatical terms, a cognate accusative, a toil at which he toils. This is actually a literary device that emphasizes the grievous toil that cursed humanity and has been doomed to exert since the fall. So this cognate accusative, the toil at which he toils, emphasizes the grievous toil that cursed humanity has been doomed to exert ever since the fall. In other words, it's alluding to the curse of the ground in Genesis 3:17 through 19. Thus, the imagery of toiling arduously under the sun presents a parched and thirsty ground that yields little produce. And so essentially the question then is, what does human history and nature demonstrate in such a sin-cursed world? That is the question that Kohelet is answering in our text for today. What does human history and nature demonstrate in such a sin-cursed world? And here's the point. Everything exhibits endless cycles of repetition that are apparently futile. In the endless successions of human generations, verse 4. In the heavenly bodies, verse 5. In wind patterns, verse 6. And also in bodies of water and hydrological cycles, in verse 7. All these things, everything in visible creation, exhibits endless cycles of repetition that are seemingly futile. And so then in verses 8 and follows, despite the wearying cycles of endless repetition, man never finds true contentment or satisfaction in a sin-cursed world. Verse 8, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Man never finds true satisfaction or contentment in a sin-cursed world. A key point. Nevertheless, every new generation seeks after some satisfying novelty, some gain, something of lasting permanence, something that is not Hevel. However, there is nothing new under the sun, verse 9. It has been already in the ages before us, verse 10. Verse 11 then is the climactic conclusion that informs the phrase all is Hevel in verse 2. Verse 11 helps us understand the meaning of verse 2, what it means when Kohelet says all is Hevel. In verse 11, it also explains the futility of man's arduous toil under the sun in verse 3. And this is the point then from verse 11. Based on verse 10, the phrase, quote, remembrance of former things in verse 11a points to real progress in human advancement. In other words, despite human innovations and changes in technology, each generation suffers from the same mistakes, weaknesses, and sin-cursed futility. In other words, in a sin-cursed world, verse 3, there is no true progress or gain through man's toil under the sun. Despite all of man's arduous toil, everything is forgotten. It is not remembered. And so there is no genuine, true progress or gain. So then some important conclusions from our passage for today in verses 3 through 11. First, it is wise to remember that all human toil under the sun in a sin-cursed world is Hevel, breath, vapor. It is fleeting and ephemeral. It is transitory. And so there is no true and sincere gain. There is no true gain and even progress in a sin-cursed world. The endless cycles of repetition in human history and nature confirm the truth of chapter 1, verses 2 through 3, when we take a larger perspective, when we take a step back and observe human history and the endless cycles of repetition in nature and creation in the observable universe. We see that the truth of verses 2 and 3, that all is hevel, and that there is no gain through man's arduous toil in a sin-cursed world. We see those truths to be confirmed. That is a reality in human history and creation. Despite the wearying cycles of endless repetition, man never finds true contentment or satisfaction in a sin-cursed world. It is wise then to realize this truth early on, that man never will find true contentment or lasting permanent satisfaction in this sin-cursed world. Verse 11, in a sin-cursed world, there is no true progress or gain through man's toil under the sun. Again, there is no true or genuine progress or gain through man's toil under the sun in a sin-cursed world. Now, brothers and sisters, this is not overly pessimistic. This is mere reality. This is truth. This is the way it is. And so it is wise then, rather than to be naive and overly idealistic, to detach ourselves from the reality of a sin-cursed world, it is wise to be face to face with the true reality and condition of things. So that finally, it is wise to understand biblical reality. It is wise to have a grip on truth and reality, the way this world actually is. It reminds me of that axiom, the truth shall set you free. It is wise and it is liberating to know the reality of a sin-cursed world, and thus then to look towards God for hope and truth and ultimate meaning and satisfaction and contentment. So, brothers and sisters, I pray that the biblical reality, the true, genuine worldview of Kohelet, is a blessing and is wisdom for us for the rest of this week and for the rest of our days. Thank you. Have a great rest of the week.